Before closing statements could occur, however, a new witness for the state stepped forward, Louis Moves Camp. He said he was not only at Wounded Knee, but that he also witnessed the leaders orchestrate the alleged crimes and even commit them. It was the star witness for whom the state had been searching. It was a little too convenient, and on cross-examination, the contradiction sprang up right away. In one heated exchange, Louis Moves Camp said, quote, "You're trying to put words in my mouth," unquote. To which Kunstler responded, quote, "I think that's already been done by others," unquote. The witness's mother was in the audience, and she approached the bench, bewildered, saying, quote, "Your Honor, I want to talk to my son," unquote. Then, looking at her son, she yelled, quote, "What did they do to you so you're lying?" unquote. She had to be escorted out, and Judge Nickel was furious. He believed this was a ploy designed by the defense. The drama was only beginning. In court the next day, Louis Moves Camp accused Kunstler of trying to confuse him, which led to jeers from the courtroom, causing Judge Nickel to clear the courtroom of anyone with the AIM insignia. The next day, a visibly agitated Nickel had marshals remove an entire row for laughing at the witness's testimony. A scuffle ensued, and 2 people were maced. Kunstler was furious and made his feelings plain. At this outburst, Nickel asked if he would like to join those in police custody, at which Kunstler threw his pencil down and shouted, quote, "I don't care whether I do or not, Judge," unquote. Lane followed his co-counsel, saying, quote, "Take me away," unquote. The weekend passed, and on Monday more sober heads prevailed. Both judge and the defense team expressed regret at their role in the disturbance, and Louis Moves Camp was back on the witness stand. The defense claimed it had 2 witnesses who were able to place Louis Moves Camp in California for the majority of the Wounded Knee occupation. They also claimed that he had become a star witness in order to receive a pardon for the 5 felonies stacked against him. To make matters worse, it was revealed he had been accused of rape after being brought into the custody of the FBI. In response to these rumors, FBI agents told Moves Camp, quote, "not to worry about it," unquote. The rape in question was of a teenager, and her complaint was never looked at again. As if the FBI couldn't look worse at this point, a truly comical episode transpired in court. During the interrogation of a witness, Kunstler noticed a door on the side of the courtroom that was opening and closing slightly. He pointed this out to the judge and pulled the door open. 2 FBI agents proceeded to stumble out into the courtroom, doing their best Abbott and Costello routine. Closing the saga, the wife of Louis Moves Camp testified before the court that her husband was only in Wounded Knee for a week and spent the rest of the occupation in California fundraising for AIM. She also claims Moves Camp told her that the FBI was going to clear his record, get them a house, and spending money. It was an explosive end to the trial. Even non-leadership trials in Sioux Falls were going extremely poorly. Most of the 120 suspects had their charges dropped or were acquitted. On September 10th, R.D. Hurd was stepping up to the podium to deliver his closing remarks. John William Sayers said he was, quote, "doubtful that he could still obtain a guilty verdict on any of the charges, but a deadlocked jury would allow him to try the case again. A second trial could still result in convictions of the 2 AIM leaders," unquote. Hurd thanked those present and reminded the jury of their responsibilities, saying, quote, "This case, believe it or not, is a criminal case. And the issue in a criminal case is the guilt or innocence of these defendants. Our system, our court, has spoken in this regard and has come down and said no. You cannot commit crimes to right wrongs or to bring about some sort of ultimate good. The law does not recognize religious and moral convictions or some higher law as justification for the commission of a crime, no matter how noble that motive may be. The defendants not only were members of the conspiracy, they were leaders of the conspiracy. You cannot terrorize innocent people. You cannot steal from innocent people. You cannot seize communities because you think you have a legitimate complaint. That's anarchy, ladies and gentlemen. The theory that the end justifies the means is as old as history, but every civilized country has rejected it. Under the laws of this nation, you cannot commit crimes. I don't care, and I submit to you, it doesn't make any difference if conditions on the Pine Ridge Reservation are good or bad. I don't care if the 1868 treaty was violated or not." Unquote. He then claimed the jury had two choices: acquit these two or follow the letter of the law. Heard closed by saying, quote, "I submit to you that you really don't have two choices." Unquote. Fellow prosecutors summed up their case further, explaining the firefights and lootings, the assaults, and the conspiracy charges against the two defendants. The defense was next. They summed up their argument by reminding the jury that the state could not produce one single valid witness who was able to place Banks or Means at the scene of any crime. They called into validity the entire court proceedings and claimed that Joe Trembach had committed perjury on the stand when he lied about his knowledge of the illegal wiretapping. Kunstler would wrap up the proceedings saying he was, quote, "privileged to have sat in on history," unquote. He went on to compare the burgeoning native civil rights movement to the early labor movement in America. There, too, people had done illegal things in order to gain their rights. He then railed against the conspiracy charge, saying it was, quote, "the law that has always been used against all sorts of movements. The theory of conspiracy is that if you find these things were done, there must have been an agreement to do it," unquote. The events of Wounded Knee, he argued, were a protest that was turned into a siege because of government involvement, and that it was a last resort for the long disenfranchised and abused native peoples. He goes on to say, quote, "What really else was there to wait for? The next election, so more babies could die in the hospital? Wounded Knee was not a revolution, but it was an attempt to secure some reason for remaining alive. Every word said by the prosecution against these two men and the people they stand for has been said about everyone down the long range of history. Everyone has been so condemned who stands up. It is difficult. It is dangerous. It causes death, as it has been, in this case, to two young Indians. But it is the way the world changes. Those who never speak never bring about change. Those who never act continue the same dreary path. Those who follow are those who go down in chains eventually, and all of us with them. You have a role in that, to judge whether these men are felons and should be sent to jail. There is a fighting chance for something decent in this world, and it will not come by sending these men to prison." Unquote. Kunstler finished his remarks by reading a stanza from the Stephen Vincent Benet poem, American Names, and by saying, quote, "These men are in your hands. Take good care of them. They are my brothers." Unquote. Heard was furious and delivered a 2-hour-long rebuttal against the defense's attempt to turn the meaning of this case into something more. In his rebuttal, he compared AIM to a, quote, "bunch of hoodlums," unquote, and accused the defense of making him seem like a, quote, "heartless beast," unquote. He then called the prospect of the defendants being found not guilty a tragedy. After 8 months of trial, the jury finally left for deliberations. The strain on the jurors was obvious. One juror was hospitalized because of the stress. The prosecution hoped this would lead to a mistrial and refused to allow the trial to proceed with 11 jurors, even though this is entirely valid. Heard's problem is that he directly spoke to the press about his intentions to seek a mistrial, allowing him to try the case again. This infuriated Judge Nickel, who tried privately to get Heard to accept the outcome of the 11-person jury. Heard refused, at which point the defense put forward a motion to dismiss charges based on military interference in a civil disturbance and Heard's breach of ethical, prosecutorial guidelines, as he was blatantly seeking conviction over justice. On September 16th, Judge Nickel told the court he was dismissing the charges against Banks and Means because of misconduct on the prosecution's part. Claiming serious negligence by the state and state attorneys, he concluded his decision by saying, quote, "I'm rather ashamed that our government was not represented better in the trial of this case." Unquote. There was jubilation that the trial, which had lasted so long and sucked so many resources from AIM, was finally over. Celebrities were out in droves, including Marlon Brando and Harry Belafonte. In Pine Ridge, Dick Wilson called the decision, quote, "ridiculous. The judge must have joined AIM." Unquote. The only prosecutor to get convictions against AIM used it to launch a political campaign in the state, and South Dakotans overwhelmingly voted for him. Meanwhile, both head prosecutors were named two of the, quote, "outstanding assistant U.S. attorneys in the nation," unquote, and later named federal judges by right-wing Governor Neep. Banks likened this to the government handing out medals of honor for the butchering of women and children in 1890. In mid-October 1974, the government finally secured convictions against 4 people on charges of conspiracy in connection to the Custer riot. One so charged was Sarah Bad Heart Bull, who was there protesting the death of her son when the riot exploded. The rest of the trials against AIM were not high profile, and they found themselves lacking the necessary funds to defend the men and women accused of so many crimes.